gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable, and this week we're talking about B2B marketing lessons from Christopher Nolan with the help of our guest, the CMO at Jellyfish. Kyle Lacy. Kyle, how are you?
You know how good I feel right now because you just mentioned my name with Christopher Nolan. I'm having a great
That's
day.
Right. It kind of felt like that when I was saying it. I was thinking, I'm like noted Christopher Nolan expert, Kyle Lacy. And,
Yes.
and in fact, you are the B2B marketing expert of all of Christopher Nolan's work.
Yeah. I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn, actually, like right now, probably.
That's right. Noted B2B evangelist of Christopher Nolan. Speaking of that, why the heck did you pick him to talk about today?
I mean, he is the best storyteller of multiple generations, in my opinion. Whether I think in past lives, he was probably an author or a poet, and he just happened to fall in love with making movies, and he's brilliant. I think he's just so good at storytelling.
And tell us a little bit about your role as CMO at Jellyfish.
Long story short, it's serving the marketing team and serving our customers and prospects and sales. And I think ultimately marketing is meant to be the spoke in the wheel, right? And that's kind of our job as marketers, especially at Jellyfish. So for me, it's half my time serving my team and the other half is trying to understand the people that we sell to, for sure. And that's kind of that is the role in general.
Meredith, who the heck is Christopher Nolan?
So if we were to go back to 1978 to London, you'd find a young Christopher Nolan, about 7 or 8 years old, who just got this Super 8 camera from his dad.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
And this was like the big start for him. So he started making these film shorts with his toys and things like that. And he ended up being inspired by Sir Ridley Scott, who directed the Alien movies, Blade Runner, and other sci-fi films, which he was really known for. And this is, of course, Christopher Nolan, who, though he never went to film school, he just won his first ever Oscar this year for directing Oppenheimer. He'd been previously nominated for Dunkirk, and Oppenheimer won 7 Oscars overall, which is so awesome. So Christopher Nolan is a British writer and director. He's known for his movies, like we said, Oppenheimer, Dunkirk, Inception, and the Batman trilogy, just these huge, beautiful cinematic movies. His wife, Emma Thomas, is the co-producer for almost all of his work, and they have their own production company called Syncope. His brother, Jonathan Nolan, also co-wrote some of his movies, including Memento and the Batman trilogy. So Christopher Nolan is really known for writing these experimental and super complex conceptual storylines. Like his second movie, this is what blows my mind. His second movie was Memento.
You don't remember where you've been or what you've just done.
I can't make new memories. Everything just fades.
Half of which is told in reverse, chronological order. And then there was Inception, some of which is told in like these layers of dream states. And so they're super just kind of like mind-blowing, mind-bending narratives.
By the way, Memento is basically taught to young writers, young screenwriters, as like what not to do. Like, don't even try to do this, because it's so hard to tell the backwards story. Like, it's so incredibly hard. And basically, I mean, I've heard this from multiple different folks where it's like, okay, it worked once. Every other movie that's backwards in the history of humanity is all trash. You know, who knows if that's true or not. But
I couldn't tell you one that's backwards, honestly, outside of Memento.
Right?
There's like Fight Club that's told like in a circle. Like there's some things like that, but it's not as,
that's fair.
Yeah. But it's not, you're right, it's not the same.
It's not straight up backwards. And the thing about it's so hard to pace a story, you know, when you know the ending, right? Is like, that's, you know, part of it is so.
Yeah,
but anyways,
sure.
I mean, Memento is just like, you know, we could have done this whole episode just on Memento, because it's insane. That's his second movie. That's like when the rapper comes out with their second album, where the first one is a super gritty one, and the second one is like, I finally have the money to do whatever I want. Except I don't think he necessarily had the money to do whatever he wanted, but it's just incredible.
Yeah, I guess Memento was written, it started as a short story that his brother Jonathan wrote, and he was like, we should make this into a movie. And so
ultimately, Jonathan might be the hidden hero here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so true. But so on his process, because I was like, how does he come up with these super like interesting narratives? And so I guess he obviously has his inspiration, right? Ridley Scott and his brother's writing are sort of parts of that, but he doesn't really sit down to write a script until he's absolutely ready to. And so part of that is he does a ton of planning. He diagrams these things. And so I saw a video of him diagramming Memento where he describes it as a hairpin. So some of the narrative is told in correct chronological order, and then the other half is told in reverse, and then they meet in the very end.
I'm not a killer. I'm just someone who wanted to make things right. Can I just let myself forget what you've told me?
So anyway, that's part of like his process. He says he imagines his narrative as kind of like a maze or a labyrinth that the viewer is dropped into. So then the viewer is kind of like the camera, right? And the camera is kind of like an extra character. And so you're kind of just you're witnessing the whole thing, right? But despite a lot of his films having a nonlinear narrative, Christopher Nolan actually writes the films first frame to last. And he kind of does it in one fell swoop. But one thing that he said that I thought was interesting was you have to do something that really excites you. And whatever's different about that, in the case of following a nonlinear structure, it's a somewhat unusual choice, but it's those things that are the strength of the project. It's the things that you can bring to what you're doing or bringing to the filmmaking craft that maybe not everyone else is doing. Maybe not everyone else can do or has thought to do. That's what's going to distinguish the thing, which I thought was really interesting when it comes to content, because it's like so much of B2B content can be kind of like the same looking or whatever. So you're always looking to do something that's different. The other strategy that he uses I thought was interesting was he tells a story subjectively from an unreliable narrator. So he's playing with like how memory and identity are so malleable, like especially in Memento. It's like, what is actually true and what can you trust? So in Memento, it's that Leonard, the main character, has amnesia, and you're experiencing the film in his mindset. So you're kind of like, what is the truth?
Your notes could be unreliable.
Memory's unreliable.
Ah, please.
No, really. Memory's not perfect. It's not even that good. Ask the police. Eyewitness testimony is unreliable. The cops don't catch a killer by sitting around remembering stuff.
Right.
They collect facts.
That's not what I'm saying.
They make notes and they draw conclusions. Facts, not memories. That's how you investigate. I know. It's what I used to do. Look, memory can change the shape of a room. It can change the color of a car. And memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation. They're not a record. And they're irrelevant if you have the facts.
In Inception, the viewer is subjected to this dream world that we know is fake, but the lines are often super blurred.
Now this is where I need you. You create the world of the dream. We bring the subject into that dream, and they fill it with their subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange.
And so with this strategy, we, the viewers, like, don't know what's real. We don't know what we can trust. And we're experiencing the story as the characters. So those are a couple like really interesting sort of strategies he uses in his storytelling. But I'm wondering, Kyle, like, what has stuck out to you? Like, what do you love about Christopher Nolan?
I mean, you've pretty much covered it. I'd say that because he loves the craft so much, he has the ability to, well, he has a belief in himself to take risks in his filmmaking.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I think you can apply that to anything. Like if you love the craft and you are obsessed with the craft and you understand what makes people enjoy what you do, whether you're doing a podcast, you're a marketer, or you're Christopher Nolan. Big leap there. But you can take risks because most of the time they'll work because you're so passionate about it. And I think that's what I appreciate about him is that he doesn't really care what other people think. He's going to do the thing he enjoys doing. Right. And it's kind of like Rick Rubin's another person that is an example of that, where I know I don't want to switch to Rick Rubin, but where you're so passionate about something, it doesn't matter what the customer wants or what your fans want or whatever. You're going to do what is most pleasurable to you. And usually it works because you understand the craft so well. And that's what I love most about him, is that he just does what he loves, and it shows.
One of the things that, Kyle, you actually brought up when we spoke previously was the sound design, like the audio, especially with Tenet, brought up some controversy. Wondering if you could share that now too, because that was one thing where he did all of the sound design with so much conviction, and then it ended up like people kind of hated it when they were seeing it in theaters. So go ahead.
It wasn't for me. I'll just speak on behalf of my thoughts on Tenet. For me, I was just disappointed in general.
Oh, okay.
Sound design aside, but it makes me respect him more for what it's worth. The storyline leading up to it, you're like, holy hell, he's going to knock this out of the park. It seems confusing, but I know that he's going to I'm going to walk out of that theater and really understand what the hell was going on in that movie. I've watched that movie 4 times and I'm still kind of confused of what's going on. And that's what's disappointing to me. The sound and the cinematography and all that stuff, I will always have respect for it. But it was just, there was so much potential, in my opinion, of what that movie could be. And you can't make something that confusing, in my opinion. But again, I'm a marketer. I don't write scripts for Hollywood, and I haven't won an Oscar or made a motion picture. So, you can take it with a grain of salt. But that was my initial thought on Tenet. It's it's just too confusing. Brilliant story idea, just not consumable.
So I was listening to Masterclass with David Mamet, who's, famous writer. And he brought up a really interesting thing about the movie, I think it's Arrival.
There are days that define your story beyond your life. Like the day they arrived.
And he was talking about, he's like, I don't want to put down other people's work, but he's like, basically the Arrival, which is not a Christopher Nolan movie, but I think it illustrates a point here. So in Arrival, they, there's the life before, then this alien ship lands on it. And then, there's these sort of octopus looking things. And then they have to figure out how to communicate with them. And then afterwards, there's sort of like this, military sort of thing at the end. And he was like, the reason why that movie, they didn't nail it is because the hard part of it is not the third act that they came up with. The hard part is, how the hell do you figure out how to talk to octopuses? He's like, that is the concept of the movie. And I think that one of the things that Nolan does is he takes the hardest part of the story, which is the reason why you get paid all the big bucks to write these things.
Right.
And that's the part that he focuses on, is like, what is the crux of, time travel? What is the crux of if you, had amnesia? What is the crux of, if you could go into people's dreams? And he attacks like that part of it. And sometimes like, he does it better, than others. But these are the things that clearly no other person really tries to face head on, and definitely are not successful in. And that just, it really struck me thinking about that quote of like, as a creator, you need to focus on like, what is the hard part? And if you can't figure it out as a writer, then that's sort of the sign that like you're onto something, is like, oh, that's the hard part.
Yeah. And the hard part of Tenet wasn't whether the sound was too loud.
Exactly.
Like,
that's not why the movie didn't work. That's exactly right.
Exactly. It's like, it's the fact that you're raving fans that like own 5 DVD versions of Memento could not understand what the hell you were trying to say for half the movie. Right.
And I think that's fine. I think that part of the thing with his movies is that it is an exploration of it. It is like, it is this gritty thing that like you're going to experience. And, one of the things that, he's noted is talking about is that he never re-records dialogue in post-production, which I think is freaking rad. And like, because, awesome. It gives it a grittier, more real feel. And I think that all of his films have this idea of like, they feel more lived in. And like, if someone says something, you can't hear it, well, then you just didn't hear it. You know what I mean? Like in life, when you walk around, you don't hear every single thing that people are saying, right? And I think that that's a very different take that most storytellers, have, which is like, when I wrote Murder in HR or co-wrote Murder in HR, I wanted every single joke to land. I wanted every single thing that I wrote to be very legible.
They all did. They all did.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, gee, thanks, Kyle. But like there's things that don't necessarily come out in that. And in marketing, it's the exact opposite. Marketing and sales is confusion equals no sale, right? That is what we're taught. That is the anything that else is confusing, you don't want. Whereas, Nolan says, I'm going to make this really confusing. You're going to be dropped in the maze, but by experiencing all the different pieces of the maze and looking around at all the other stuff and looking around at the spectacle, that is like part of the experience of doing it. And it's freaking cool as hell.
Yeah. And I think it is a broad leap to try to connect the mastery of Christopher Nolan to what I do on a daily basis. However, I think the reality is when you've mastered your craft and you understand the minute technical details that make it enjoyable, whether that's marketing or producing a movie, you can make decisions and take risks because you understand what the impact will be because you've spent so much time obsessing over it.
If you understand an obsession, then you know you won't change my mind.
And I think that's the main theme, especially with somebody like Christopher Nolan. I mean, there's a reason why you should only see his movies in IMAX. Yeah. You shouldn't watch them on your phone. And I have a friend who, if he's listening, he's going to laugh because I watched Oppenheimer for the first time on my phone and he about threw up on me. But I just couldn't wait. But, it's when you have an opinion and you're good at what you do, you can take the risk. And he does it regularly. He just wins most of the time.
What I think is fascinating, if you look at the 3 different types of films that and I'm just generalizing by saying 3 different types, you have sort of making real stuff, which he had not done before, doing Dunkirk and now Oppenheimer, which now, he gets all these accolades and all these Academy Awards and stuff like that for those films, which I think is silly that we give all the Academy Awards to all the stuff that actually happened. I'm like, nobody made up that story. That story happened. But anyways,
what about Barbie? Barbie,
exactly, right?
That's what we should be talking about that.
So he's a masterful storyteller at things that are real, which is fascinating. Like he's great at that. He's a great storyteller at a superhero movie in Batman where, spoiler alert, a boy gets bit by a radioactive bat. Wait, no, that's the wrong one. Rich kid, buys fancy toys and saves Gotham.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me.
Bruce?
Which is as good versus evil, black versus white, simple storytelling as there possibly is, right? It's we're going to watch this hero, we're going to watch him struggle a bunch, and then at the end of the day, guess what? They ain't going to die, and they're going to make it, and they're going to save the city. And so he's able to tell a story where we know the beginning and the end in that way too, and create all these characters and all this cool stuff. And then in the middle pot, you have the Momentos and the Inceptions and the Tenets, which are just like mind-bending, mind-warping things that like nobody else is even sort of thinking of creating. And again, to parallel it to marketing, it's like we only ever tell stories that we know the answers to. We never tell stories that we don't know the answers to, right? But there is room to tell stories to fill in the details of the answers. Like, oh, this person got 3x ROI. Great. That's like your superhero movie. Like, okay, great. What happened in there? But where there's the devil is in the details is on all the stories that have all these other crazy sort of components to it of the buying process where, the CEO said, F it, we're buying this. I don't care if you did all the research or, whatever else. And I think that it's interesting to me that he has sort of mastered all different types of those fiction, nonfiction, and, these hero types, because it shows that he can sort of do anything. And that's pretty rare.
Yeah. And I think that it's important just to note that he makes things for different people too. Like Dunkirk is a very different movie than Memento, than Tenet.
Where are we going? Dunkirk.
I'm not going back. There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
If we go there, we'll die.
And I think from a marketing perspective, you've got to be able to master all the different channels in order to be creative. Like you need to master the ROI story. You need to be able to master the playbooks that are needed for your customers. And then you could do stuff like Murder in HR. Or we have a podcast where our CEO talks to engineering leaders about their hobbies. Like you try to, once you've kind of mastered the content needed to be tactical, you can start creating brand content, in my opinion, that is more creative and entertainment oriented and more about the human that's buying the product, not necessarily the product itself.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it gets to the human side of these things, right? And like he takes very, very big, hairy concepts that are literally reality bending concepts, and he makes it so simple for you to be able to understand it. Tenet notwithstanding, but
well, Oppenheimer is a great example of that. Not the mind bending stuff. Well, I guess you could, but
it's pretty.
I guess we could say it's probably mind bending, but initially, I was surprised they didn't spend more time on the impact. And I know why. The impact of the bomb on the civilizations we dropped it on, right? But it was more about him as an individual, of Oppenheimer as an individual, than it was about anything else.
You are the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves. And the world is not prepared.
And I thought that the way that they thought through that movie was really interesting. And maybe I would credit that to more of the screenwriter than I would Christopher Nolan. But
doesn't he write?
Did he co-write it with his brother?
I don't know. That's a good question. We should look that up.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, one of the things, so I think it's a great marketing takeaway to say, treat the camera as a character. I think that like that's a really cool thing to look at from your marketing is like, is the camera really a character? Especially like as we're doing, different sort of things. There's a million takeaways that you probably have within that, but I think it's an interesting idea that you're showing the point of view of a person, and that could be a person in the buying committee. It could be a person outside of the buying committee. It could be someone who's a user. It could be, but thinking of that at that person that, that character is there, right? You're sitting in the boardroom. I believe it was Howard Schultz who famously would talk about decision making. He said every time I would make a decision for Starbucks, I would imagine that it was like a customer was sitting in the room. It's like a customer, his mom, and like a board member or something like that. I forget the third one. But the idea of sort of like, who's in the room. And I feel like we never do that with our marketing stuff. Who's in the room? There's 15 people in these modern buying committees. Everyone's in the damn room. Everyone's making this decision, right?
But I also think the content that I've always found interesting, which I would love to spend more time on, is like this idea of a day in the life. Like we sell to an engineering leader. There is 500 other things that engineering leader is dealing with on a day-to-day basis that might not necessarily pertain to our product, but does lead to exuberance, stress, productivity, the Amazon package being laid for his daughter's birthday present, or so this idea of how do we build more of the day in the life of the buyer into our content is interesting to me, because I think it's the human element that's the most interesting part of marketing. There's one of my favorite commercials, which unfortunately was from Dow Chemical, but which now that I look back on it, the fact that they call the human element as the most important thing in their chemical company kind of dampens the enthusiasm I have for it. But the ad was, the most important thing in the world is the human element. And I think that is why I love marketing. And that's why I watch movies. And that's why I believe Christopher Nolan enjoys creating stories about people and about remarkable events, because he also enjoys it.
Another thing that I think he uses so well is these objects. Meredith, can you tell us a little bit about like the objects that he uses?
Yes, I can. So he said objects are super important in his storytelling, and he mentions like the totems in Inception, like the chess piece and things like that.
So you're learning.
An elegant solution for keeping track of reality. Was it your idea?
No, it was Maul's actually. This one was hers. She'd spin it in the dream, it would never topple. Just spin and spin.
He called them inserts, but he also does close-ups of like notebooks and photographs specifically. Like you see photographs obviously in Memento, but you see it in a lot more of his works too. So he uses those as kind of like focal points in a lot of the shots. And so you have to be paying really close attention to each of them as like kind of like clues in the storyline.
I think it's so smart and it's so brilliant, because when you're trying to tell an extremely complex story, that he focuses you in on this single thing. And it's like, is the top spinning? Yes or no? Oh, okay. If it's spinning, I understand that, the world is fake. If it stops, it's not. Like crystal clear storytelling by using a totem rather than like our dreams bending our reality and falling, crumbling cities and all these sort of things. And like, I just think that that's like, again, as a marketing lesson, there are these things that are so easy to understand, and like focusing on, singular, like especially physical things could be a way to add some of that in. I don't know how you would do it, but I feel like that would be a good idea.
I mean, I would, what do they call the little surprises you find on websites?
Easter eggs?
Oh, Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. I mean, I would do Easter eggs all day long. I found one recently where rubber duckies like fell all over the page and you couldn't click on anything, which was weird. But I think but that's like this, one thing we talk about a lot at Jellyfish, at least on the marketing team, is our main theme is surprise and delight. And I think that that's what's most important about the totem idea. Once you read about it, you don't quite realize it when you're watching the movie, but once you read about it, it's kind of that surprise where it's like, oh, that makes complete sense now. And then you go back and watch the movie again, and then you understand the chess piece and whatever the spinny top that they have, which is the primary one. But I think it's about surprising people, whether that's a direct mail that made impact, or it's some rubber ducky on your website, or a handwritten note in the mail. I think that there's a lot of that you can incorporate into marketing.
Yeah, I think, like mascots, I think end up helping with that. Obviously, like Salesforce made a huge push with a bunch of their mascot stuff back in the day. A lot of companies do that.
Was it Sassy? Sassy, right? Is that the name of the?
I think Sassy. Yeah, Sassy's I think the one that has the red line through software, right? Which like back then
you said they went overboard, right? Because they definitely went overboard on the mascots.
Well, then they added like 50 of them.
Yeah, they have like a whole camp of them.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine. Good.
Yeah,
one of the best brand marketers on the face of the planet works at Salesforce. So I do love that, but they've got a lot of mascots.
No, and I think, they have a lot of products and they have a lot of other stuff, but I think that like that idea of like adding the totem to the thing of like, okay, Einstein is for their AI, et cetera, et cetera. There's one goatee. There's a goat. Anyways, there's a bunch of them. There's Barry, I think, is the bear. Astro is the sort of humanoid. Anywho, but sort of the idea of like give a look to something, and I think that that you can sort of like identify things and have a visual thing there. There's a million tools that have monkeys or chimps or all sorts of things like that. And I think a lot of people have mascots, but it's like, okay, how do you operationalize the mascot?
And I think, Salesforce with the whole Trailblazer idea, I think is really interesting. I think it's a good story. I think they tell it well. I don't think that Fleming would ever listen to a podcast of mine or an interview that I've done, but if he does, you do a very
He's coming
good
on
job.
this one.
Is he?
We'll point him to this episode.
You should. So I'm just going to make it very clear, Colin, if you're listening to this, I have a lot of respect for what you do. But I think that from a trailblazing perspective, they've done a great job in how they incorporate more of the mascots for sure.
So there's a great story where Nolan is sitting down with Tom Hardy. Actually, let me reverse it. Tom Hardy is thinking about Bane, and he's trying to figure out this character. And he saw this interview with this guy with an English accent who had this sort of crazy English accent. And so he goes to Nolan and he goes, he's like, I can kind of do this two ways. It's like the first way I can do sort of Darth Vader type voice, right? Just like a regular down the road. It's just a voice, but it has the mouthpiece on it. The other one is like, I could do sort of a version of this crazy voice that I was thinking about, and here it is. He's like, if we go with option 2, it might completely flop and people might hate it. And Nolan looks at him, he goes, do that one.
What is it? Your money and infrastructure have been important. Till now.
What are you?
I've Gotham's reckoning. It and the borrowed time you've all been living on.
Pure evil.
I'm necessary evil.
And I think that is like such a Christopher Nolan in a nutshell thing. Like,
Yeah,
he's supporting the actor, but also he would rather have the weirder, more interesting, more distinct thing every time. And I feel like in marketing land, so often we just pick the more boring one. And it's like, we should not pick the more boring one. We should pick the one that is more interesting.
Yeah. More interesting is always better. And I think it's easy. I think when you see boring, and I've done it, and I keep doing it, I'm going to be honest with you. I think we're pretty good at the creative side for sure. But it's easier to do boring marketing. It's easier to look at a list of use cases and build a playbook around those use cases that it applies to the product. It's much harder to drive a creative process that surprises and delights. And I'll go back to what I originally said at the very beginning, which is Christopher Nolan has mastered this idea of creating a storyline using film. And so the fact that Tom Hardy had a voice that he liked means that it was going to work anyway, because he understands deeply what the audience wants. And ultimately, that's the marketer's job, is that you need to deeply understand what the audience needs. And that might not be a playbook with use cases connected to your product. It might be something completely different, because we're all in an attention economy. We all know that, right? And that's the reality.
Meredith, we need to drop in I was born in the dark, molded by it.
Let's do it. I'm going to keep your version in there too, though.
Yeah, you should. You should keep your version.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
The other thing The one quote that Christopher Nolan brings up all the time is the one from Dark Knight, where Harvey Dent, who's played by Aaron Eckhart, he says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
One of my favorite lines in any movie.
So good.
And Christopher Nolan, then I quote, I'm plagued by a line from The Dark Knight, and I'm plagued by it because I didn't write it. My brother Jonathan wrote it. It kills me because it's the line that most resonates. And at the time, I didn't even understand it. He says, I read it in his draft and I was like, all right, I'll keep it in there, but I really don't know what it means. Is this really a thing? And then over the years since the films come out, it just seems truer and truer. In this story, it's absolutely that. Build them up, tear them down. It's the way we treat people. I mean, it's just, it's goosebumps. The one other thing that I think is important to note, I think that he got very lucky that he's a brother that's very good screenwriter, but he also understands how to surround himself with people that are very good at what they do. And I think part of being a leader in general, manager, and it doesn't even have to be marketing, is that you have to find the people that truly love their craft and are good at what they do so that the end product, no matter what it is the best that you could possibly do. The milquetoast marketing that we talk about is because teams are put together and it's not the most passionate people. And that's just sad, in my opinion, because I love what I do and I love marketing and I want people to love it as much as I do, as much as I love Christopher Nolan movies. But the reality is that people don't.
Yeah, and I think that part of the reason that people just forget that there's a really weird, interesting, esoteric, strange person on the other side of the business transaction that they're trying to do. You know, the engineers that you're selling to, they race road bikes, you know, right? It's like they love Formula One, they make pottery, they throw flaming axes in the air and catch them. Like, who knows what the hell they do? They do all sorts of stuff, right? Like we all do. We ran
into a guy the other day that designs motocross tracks.
Wow, cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's like, but that's what makes storytelling, especially in the marketing frame, so interesting. Like anybody can do an ROI study. Not everybody can try to figure out what really drives people on the weekends, right? Because that's the most interesting story, in my opinion.
And that's why, and it's why you created the 5 to 9 podcasts that y'all make to talk about all the cool stuff that engineers are doing when they're not at work, because they're really freaking interesting people. And like, that is a risk. It's a risk to make the show that we make now, which is like, tangentially related to marketing, but mostly about storytelling.
But you know what? It's interesting it's interesting, right? And for me, when it comes to content marketing, if it's not an RFP or some product playbook, it needs to be interesting. Because it's this crossover, the age-old like B2B to B2C, like all this stuff. And I know that y'all understand this. But the entertainment side of podcasting and videos and all that stuff is so important because you want people to listen. Anybody can tune into a podcast about leadership values and what does it take to be a great manager. Like there's 500 of them because it's easier to do. It's easier to make those things. It's harder to do what we're doing right now, which y'all prep for a Christopher Nolan / CMO interview. But it's interesting, right? And that's why people like to be on it. That's why people listen to it. And it's this idea of illogical marketing, right? Like the more illogical you can be, the more creative it is and the more people enjoy it. And it's just hard to grasp for a lot of marketers.
I've always seen you as a very illogical guy, so I think that tracks.
It's so true. You can ask anybody who knows me.
We got a few minutes left here. Any thoughts on sort of like how you plan and build, how do you invest in content? How do you think of the ROI of content as it fits into your broader marketing budget and marketing plans?
I want to hear Colin Fleming's answer to this. You need to ask him this in the interview. But ultimately it's tied to bookings, right? Like whether you're doing a direct source attribution model or an influence number attribution model, If you're doing it well, it's a rising tide lifts all ships, and you should be hitting your pipeline and bookings numbers, right? You can get it down to how many listeners and that tactical metric. But for me as a CMO, I want it to be creative. I want it to be enjoyable. And ultimately, everything that we do as a team, we've got to drive pipeline and we have to hit our bookings numbers. Because if that's not the case, then we don't have a business and none of us have jobs, right? So, I think the nuance is how you balance the extremely illogical podcasts, weird direct mails, Lego building sets, all the stuff that I think surprise and delight people, with the other things that might not be as fun and creative, but drive business value, right? And that's where I would love to tell you that there's a framework you should follow, but it's what is enjoyable to the customer? How do you understand that they like it, whether that's an increase in listeners or shares, or you got more people wanting to be interviewed. And then it's that you're hitting the numbers that you put in front of the board. And that's ultimately the value.
I realize you like Nolan because he's illogical. Because he takes these crazy
most of his
stories,
stuff's illogical.
Right? He tries to put some logic in it.
I mean, I will take this to my grave. You kill creativity when you try to apply too much ROI to a project. Doesn't mean you shouldn't track it. Doesn't mean there shouldn't be ROI. But you sit down with a creative team and say, hey, let's think about how many downloads we can get or how much pipeline this thing is going to drive. And they just glaze over. Good creatives glaze over because you're not starting with the most important thing, which is the experience that thing is driving. You can work back, you can figure out the business impact of the thing, and it really depends on the piece of content, right? Like a playbook's going to be different than a podcast. But I like to start with the experience and then back into the business impact, because I think it just has more value and people are more creative when you start with the experience. When you start with the experience of a website build instead of how much pipeline it needs to drive, it's just better. It's better for everyone. And that's when you have ideas that work because they're illogical and nobody's seen it before.
Dude, I 100% agree. And one of the things that like when we're pitching our fiction stuff that I tell people is I'm like, if the worst thing that happens is you lose some money and people love it, like that's the worst thing that's going to happen. You made something that's freaking cool that people are going to be like, wow, this is fun. This is actually something I like. Me and my wife listen to it. Me and my, daughter listen to it, whatever. If that's the worst thing that happened is that you made people's day a little bit brighter, then like you're on the right path. You know what I mean?
Well, the worst thing that could happen as a marketing leader is that you create something that somebody really loves and you miss your bookings number. That's the worst that could happen. So that's why I like to bridge the two, because if I'm sitting in a boardroom and I'm talking about this amazing podcast that everybody enjoy listening to, and pipeline's down and bookings are down and the sales reps have no idea how to sell the product, I didn't do my job appropriately. However, if you balance it well and you hit the tactical things and you are driving pipeline and driving bookings and rising tide lifts all ships, like I said before, you're not going to look like an idiot sitting down in front of leadership saying, listen to this awesome podcast. And by the way, we're at 50% of our pipeline number for the quarter. You got to do both. You have to do both.
Kyle, great catching up with you. Great chatting with you on the show. Been awesome to have you. Final thing here, just best advice for a CMO trying to figure out brand, figure out content.
Go watch Memento. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think it's talking to go talk to your customers first. Find out what they enjoy listening to. Find out what podcasts they listen to on the way to work, what books they enjoy reading, what do they do on the weekends. Spend time with your customer and prospect, your use case, your persona. And the idea is, if you're good at what you do, the ideas are going to jump out at you. They'll be there. You just need to dig a little bit.
Fantastic. For our listeners, go check out Jellyfish. and just go give a little nudge to your engineers, maybe your CTO.
Give them a hug.
VP of engineering. Yeah, give them a hug and tell them that Jellyfish sent you. Kyle, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.